Hey friends, I'm Otis Gibbs, and this is Rex Bell. He's going to share some stories about his friendship with Townes Van Zandt.
Before I opened up the Old Quarter, I had known about Townes, and I saw him perform once at a place called The Jester. I was also opening act for a lot of people at the place called the Sand Mountain Coffee House. Very prestigious at the time, no alcohol. It was the old beatnik thing, and this lady, Mrs. Carrick, she was adamant, no alcohol. So, and we at the green room, Mrs. Carrick introduced me to Townes, and then she left, and Townes said, "Do you drink?" I said, "Yeah." He went to the window and he had a gallon of wine on a rope because it was strict no alcohol. And so we took chugs, and that little one rebellious event just solidified us as friends for life. And then shortly, just a few months after that, I opened the Old Quarter. I found the Old Quarter. I found the building I was looking for, a cheap one, and so it was funny because if you played the Old Quarter, because I stole her waitresses, and you could hear the same music, but you could smoke weed on the roof and drink beer. I mean, she didn't have a chance really. And so anyway, no one could play at the Old Quarter, or they wouldn't play at Sand Mountain anymore. Well, Townes was the first big name to break ranks. He played the Old Quarter, and she never forgave me. When he break ranks, then the Old Quarter just really took off. I had Guy Clark and Townes Van Zandt all of a sudden are my drunken buddies at the end of the bar. I didn't really know I was in songwriter royalty until I started, hanging out. He was always really fun. I mean, there was no person on earth more fun to get drunk with than Townes Van Zandt. I mean, he was upbeat. He really, he enjoyed his life when he was drunk. I can't get into the psyche of people and what it was like being Townes. If you have to be like that to be a genius, then I don't think I'm glad I'm not a genius, because he did suffer, but he was always so much fun. I mean, you won't hear many stories about Townes. You hear him doing crazy things, but not mean things. He wasn't a mean bone in his body. He liked to tease people, but he was so much fun. I mean, he was just fun to do everything with. Man, when we were on the road, just everything was an adventure with Townes. Well, do you remember in Austin, it was called Clarksville, and it was where blacks and hippies lived back in the 70s. It was shell roads. And he had a trailer, and I lived at the house across the street. And we were going through our BB gun phase. And Townes and I we would buy BBs by the gallon and shoot them every day. We had beer cans and stuff hung up everywhere. One day, we were shooting our BB gun. We just started this whole BB gun thing. We were shooting where we thought it was clear. And we're shooting like, half drunk, shooting BBs. And the guy comes out and shoots his shotgun there and says, "Stop pelting my house." We didn't know there was a house back there. Thank God. I mean, he didn't take time to ask us, but he was mad. I mean, man, we were so sorry, dude. We just had to move things over, We had no idea there was a trailer back there. No, we always stayed at motels. Occasionally, someone would have. I never liked to stay with people. I was like Townes. I love motels. Townes, motels. If he could build his dream house, it would be a motel. That's what he liked. Listen, I have this theory about Townes. I think he had defective taste buds because he didn't care about food, and he didn't even enjoy food. And listen, you can interview 100 people about Townes. You'll never hear any story about happened at the dinner table. Wasn't ever at the dinner table. If Townes could have $5,000 in his pocket, go into a supermarket and come out with white bread and bologna. And you get mayonnaise, mayonnaise, that's the way he felt about food. So I think he had defective taste buds. Well, we were eating just fine. One thing about Townes, he made good money. I mean, back in those days, you could book Townes 365 nights a year. And so Townes, I don't know how much money he made from Poncho And Lefty, but he always had money because he could always gig the next day. And he didn't care about money, which was great if you worked for Townes. We didn't really work for Townes. I worked for Lightning, and I played with Townes. I mean, whatever Townes made, it belonged to all of us. It was different with Lightning. 71, 2, and 3 is when I toured with him by myself. So I had a duel. I had a great bass playing gig with Townes and Lightning. I don't know if you remember back in those days, there was a lot of colleges that hired entertainment, especially acoustic. Well, people like Townes, you know, who were good singer-songwriter type stuff. When that was real popular. So we played a lot of colleges. In fact, when I went on, he took me on the road a couple of times. We played all colleges, all the way up the East Coast, all through North Carolina. Played Pratt Institute and New York City College. It was all really high-paying gigs. I mean, quality gigs. I mean, Townes took me on the road. He didn't need a bass player. You know, he was a really adequate guitar player. He didn't need a bass player, but he and I got involved with heroin, and not proud of it, not ashamed of it. It just happened. And he would come get me and take me on the road to get me out of Houston. Bad news from Houston, half my friends are dying. I think I was one of those friends that were dying. And of course, so it's funny, he'd take me on the road, and then we'd get to New York and we'd buy heroin together. So I'm not sure if he and I just got along real well, and we were close friends. But when we played North Carolina, all these colleges there, they offered transportation, room and board. We stayed in a boarding house one time. Do you know the song "No Deal"? Well, we were staying at an all boys college, and they bussed in the girls from all girl college. And so at the end of the night, they were taking roll call, and one of the girls was missing. I knew where the girl was. It was in Townes' room. So they had an all-out search for this girl, and we almost got in trouble. And I managed to get to Townes early enough where he got her out of the room, but that's when he wrote the song "Almost Got Run Out of Town Wearing Nothing But My Cowboy Hat." That line came from, I can't remember what called it, Pembroke, I think, North Carolina.
Did the women like Townes?
Oh my God, are you kidding me? He was like the Elvis of folk singers. I mean, there would be 100 back in the day, you know, and it was a beautiful time. It was after birth control and before AIDS. It was a beautiful time. There was just a lot of free sex and beautiful women. I mean, I didn't have to worry. I knew there was going to be 99 women that he couldn't be with. So I always got laid more than I need to. And it was kind of a perk of playing with Townes. You had access to a lot of women who just drooled over Townes. Hey, he was cool. He was intelligent, writing genius. He was fun as hell. It was a lot of fun. Townes was a lot of fun. I know he was hurting inside, but he rarely let that come out. It was intellectual women and some not, but I mean, it was an intellectual crowd. These people were into listening to music, you know, into the words, and Townes was a genius. I mean, what can you say? He's the poet as good as any poet ever. I mean, who can say who's the best, but he's up there in the echelons of the greatest writers ever. Transportation at every college, although transportation at every college changed. And so we were playing Pembroke, North Carolina, which is an Indian reservation right by there. And our mode of transportation was a bicycle for two. We went from limousines to private drivers to a bicycle built for two. And of course, Townes made me ride on the front because it was freezing. And the liquor stores in North Carolina, they look like banks, you know. They don't have, you don't get to browse through the liquor. You have to go up to a teller and say, and you know, of course, we always knew what we wanted, really cheap vodka. But it was funny. I couldn't believe that the liquor stores all looked like banks. And Townes would make me ride up front, freezing. Not that it was, I'm sure it was cold in the back too. Townes spent quite a bit of time in New York, so Townes knew where to score in New York. I have a funny scoring story. We were one of our gigs, we were playing up there, and it was February. It was freezing. And, you know, Townes, you know, he always wore really nice. He liked the leather jackets with the fringe. I mean, nothing skimpy. The best you can buy. You know, boots, hats, Stetson hats. I mean, so we went down to this bar in the Bronx, And he put me in, he just lay right here, and I'm in this bar where I thought there was going to be a knife fight, but it was pretty sleazy. So anyway, it took a while, and I see Townes coming down the road. He's got no coat and no hat and no money. And he said, man, I talked him into letting me keep my boots. And so he got robbed for all our money in his coat and his hat. He did talk him into letting him keep his boots, thank God. I mean, in February in New York, you need boots. But, you know, back then, you had the option of getting cash. And we got paid in cash a lot. We ran around, we were loaded in dough. I mean, not loaded in dough, but just so much spending money that you didn't need any more spending money. One night, somewhere in North Carolina, we were at a motel drunk. We became blood brothers that night. I still have my scar. We cut ourselves right here. So, because we had a gig the next night, and we held our hands together and counted to 10, I guess. I can't remember what we did. But that night we ended up burning. We were burning money. And we said, we got to stop. We can't burn any money. We can't burn it. So he said, let's just go out and give the nicest person, first person that's nice to us, all our money. I said, let's do it. So we went to this coffee shop, you know, at 4 in the morning. This nice lady, man, she was real sweet, brought us coffee. And we said, she's it. I said, she's it. So, you know, it looked like crackhead dealer money, and it all wadded up, you know. And I just went up and I laid it all on the counter and just walked out. And she was going, sir. Now, I'm sure she tells that story. These two idiots came in one night and put all this money on the bar. But so we gave her all the money. We got paid the next day again.
How much money was it?
I don't know. He was making $2,000 a week, and that's back when rent was $100 a month. You know, I mean, it was. I don't know how much I gave her. I might have given her $1,000. Oh, I don't know. We don't really. I was drunk too. You know, I didn't count it. We were blood brothers, man. Townes was just so much fun to be with. He enjoyed himself. He enjoyed his life. I can't say what it was like when he was alone. I know when we were alone, we still managed to talk constantly. And I was on the road with him on one of his really heavy duty writing times when he was writing. He was writing Poncho and Lefty, and he wrote "To Live's to Fly" as part of that tour he was on. He wrote "To Live's to Fly." He wrote "No Deal" from the Weird Experience. Famous Rex's Blues. Huh? Well, it's funny. We were on tour again, and I don't know where we were. It was just Townes and I. And Townes said, Rex, I have a brand new song. Why don't you step off the stage? So I stepped off the stage, and he played Rex's Blues. And this became a tradition. I never played Rex's Blues with Townes. Even though I was in the band, he would always ask me to step off the stage. And so it just became, this was my chance to go back in the green room and take a slugs off the bottle. But, and it became a tradition. But and I hated that song. It was not very flattering. I mean, you know, we're in our 20s, you know, you don't want to write a song. I mean, I didn't like it. Now I appreciate it, and I do it. I have to do it. People almost make me do it. But I hated it for a long time. Listen to the words sometimes. It's not very flattering. You got to remember, I was in my 20s, and I was starting to go bald, and I was pissed off anyway. So I just didn't take it as flattering. I always appreciated the fact that he wrote a song about me, and I didn't die before he, you know, before he did. So I guess that's pretty cool. And now I appreciate it, and it's really true. The song is about, it could be Townes' Blues, it could be Blaze's Blues, it could be it could be Otis's Blues. I mean, well, you don't drink, right?
No.
Did you ever drink?
No.
I need to interview you. But anyway, it could have been anybody's blues. We were living pretty loose. We were drinking and doing drugs, and it was the song captures what we were all doing, although it was foisted upon me to be the focus of how we were all living. So, you know, I like it now. I play it, and every time we do the Townes Wake at the Old Quarter in Galveston every year, and I have to do Rex's Blues. They won't let me go without doing it. We always played night gigs. I mean, I guess we did a couple of matinees, but Townes wasn't a matinee kind of guy. Later on, when the Hemorrhage Mountain Boys were touring with Townes, he'd gotten worse about gigs. He would get, what he would do is, we would wait. Mickey and I would wait, because he had 2 days out of each day. He had the early day where he'd get drunk, and then he'd pass out, and then it'd be a second day. So what we would do for the second day, we wouldn't wake him up until we were going on stage in 5 minutes. So he didn't have a chance to get drunk. And the first sets were always real good. Back then, even when he played drunk really well, but still it wasn't as good as, he was so pristine, his guitar playing. When he was young and he was such a good performer. He could silence a 2,000-seat audience like that. I mean, one word, and keep them silenced. That's a talent, man. That's just remarkable. So when he started getting looser and not quite playing as pristine as we all know he could, it's a little bit irritating, but hey, it's Townes Van Zandt, He's going to be that way. You couldn't stop him. He tried I remember he was sober on a few times, and he was just miserable when he was sober. He didn't talk much, just kind of to himself. That was his escape. Anyway, we were playing at this famous college, and Townes was on one of his benders, and thank God the police, we were in the motorhome, and our roadie, Johnny Guest, he left an ounce of weed on the dashboard. And so this cop was just kind of looking around, and he pointed his flashlight straight onto the ounce of weed. So we'd in between gigs, and our first and second set, we were in between. We were out, and Townes was inside. And then the cop said, "You can leave now, or you're going to jail. You leave town right now." So we had to go get Townes. He was drunk. He was in there with a tablecloth over his head, playing fiddle. And, of course, the people who ran the place they loved it. They didn't have to pay us. And we said, "We have to get out of town. Can we get paid?" And they said, "No." And so we got Townes out in the motorhome, and the cops followed us to the city limits. That's Townes's, that's where he was born, Fort Worth. But that's one of the train wrecks. And those were the train wreck gigs. What was sadder is, like when he played the Old Quarter, and he played there twice. I opened up he was the first. Richard Dobson was actually the first person that ever played the Old Quarter. Then Townes was the second week, and that's in 1996. And he couldn't. He was so weak at the time. Like I told you, he didn't weigh anything. He didn't eat properly, and he had to get X amount of drunk just to get on stage. And so his performances really sucked, and it hurt. But I still loved it. And people would come. Nobody, I know there's stories about people who used to come to see Hank Williams. They don't care if he fell off the stage. They'll pay to see him. Well, Townes was the same way. He sold out the Old Quarter instantly, even though people knew he wasn't putting on his best performances. And they were really, if you've never seen Townes, you appreciate it. His songs carry themselves, but his performance really was bad.
Do you remember the last time you saw Townes?
Yeah, I do, man. I remember it. In fact, not that I knew it was going to be the last time, but I knew it was important. A couple of times he opened up to me and said, "Man, Rex, I have the blues and I can't shake it." And I knew that. I got to spend a week with Townes at my beach house the last time he played the Old Quarter. October the 5th, and that whole week of the 5th he was there. I don't know. It might have been the last club he ever played. I know he went to Europe right after that. But he was really unhealthy. I remember he was staying at my beach house, and he stumbled in the yard, and I grabbed him, and he was so light, and Townes was like 6'3", but he was light as a feather, and bless his heart, he just didn't weigh anything. And that shocked me how light he was. I knew how weak he was. Of course, you never expect anyone to die who's, you just don't expect it.
Were you able to go to his funeral?
Yeah, I went in fact, I don't have this year's Townes Wake T-shirt, there's a picture of me tuning Townes' guitar at the funeral. And somebody captured it and put it on the T-shirts for this year's wake. It's me tuning. JT was going to play a song for the ceremony, and Townes' brother was a preacher. Did you know that? Yeah, Townes' brother was a preacher. And Townes wasn't necessarily religious. He was super spiritual. And look at his songs. Now, he wrote some beautiful religious songs. They could be in hymnals, that 100-year-old hymnal. Some of these, two hands, when he offers his hand. There's several songs that means he was very spiritual. I mean, our first wakes, when it first took off, when I first had I was just so bummed out that the first year of his anniversary of death, I just said, we're going to have a wake. And we had, I didn't plan on anything special. Just, we're going to have a wake for Townes. And then it kind of turned out to be amazing. And then a few years after that, it was so full, people flying from all around the world and the country to celebrate him. It's amazing. Another thing that I think that's been really good for Townes is the internet. As many bad things as you can say about social media, it really got Townes out there, and he's got a lot of new people who discovered what a writer he is. So this last time, this one we just had, there was a lot of young people in there, man, doing Townes songs that I know never saw Townes live. And so there's people who worship Townes. I'm one of them. I love Townes. I mean, what can you say? People used to ask me, did you know you were playing with a legend? And I knew that with Lightning. With Townes, he was just my friend, and I was playing music with him. I knew how special it was, but no, I didn't think I was, part of this legendary thing that I was. So I wouldn't have acted any different. I was Townes' drinking buddy also. In fact, I think Townes always thought he was going to outlive me. It's just, Rex's Blues is that song. In that song, Born to Grow and Grown to Die, I think Townes always thought he was going to outlive me. And he could have. Back in those days, we were reckless.